What a long, strange trip it's been. Johnnie Torch Reviews, The Flash. Welcome to another Johnnie Torch Reviews. Today, the first day of summer, and this is the final, this is finally the release of The Flash, a movie that was in the works for, no exaggeration, probably a good 10 years now. We had a lot of fun with it on the Torch News Roundup. We were chronicling the ups and downs of its production. It was a film that seemed destined to fail. Some would argue that at the box office, that's what it is doing. Again, there are different types of failures. I don't know if this is going to be financially the biggest success, but I wouldn't say it's a complete failure. Welcome to the Johnnie Torch Reviews program. We're doing this one on video, so this is not a Johnnie Torch live broadcast, but we're going to spend probably the better part of an hour going over The Flash. And I'll give you some spoiler free thoughts at first, and we will get to the spoiler section when I give you the warning. And of course, check the link in the description below for my comic, The Adventures of Bullets, Bourbon, Private Eye. You can find my website down there. All the information is below. You can check us out on Twitter. And of course, please like, share, and subscribe. Again, The Flash was cast with Ezra Miller back when the Batman v Superman film hit. And it was an unconventional casting. A lot of people were not thrilled with his portrayal, particularly as it was seen in the Justice League film. Now, again, I'm going to cover all of this history right now, and I'll be honest in saying that I liked the original Justice League film. That I felt was a step in the right direction from where Zack Snyder was taking it. Of course, the long history would also have to recall that Zack Snyder began with Justice League, and family problems and misfortune caused him to step out of it, allegedly. And Joss Whedon stepped in to complete the film. A lot of people mocked it. I think now I haven't seen the Snyder version of Justice League. Of course, that was handed back to him to complete his vision after some much ballyhooed, stuff going on Twitter with trending, restore the Snyderverse and stuff that'll still go on to this day. But that wasn't the end of it, unfortunately. And the Snyderverse kind of limped on after Justice League. They, of course, didn't really know what they were going to do. They still had a lot of stuff in the pipeline. The Flash was originally, it went back and forth through a lot of incarnations. I remember originally it was going to be a team up with Cyborg, possibly with Wonder Woman having a major role. I think they fairly early on settled on there was going to be some type of Flashpoint adaptation. And again, if you look in some of the old Torch News roundups, you'll find several times when we're talking about the Flash being postponed and rewritten, and it must have went through about 3 directors. It was really a mess. Then we finally got Andy Muschietti as the director, and it seemed like we had some pretty strong foundation laid down that the film was going to be made. The film did get made, and then of course we had problems, the pandemic, also Ezra Miller basically losing his mind. Now, he was always a colorful character to begin with, but at a certain point stuff happened, and there was a scene of him allegedly choking a pregnant woman. I don't know if the woman was actually pregnant. I took it that she was just fat. We had fun posting that video a couple of times, and we're not going to do it here. I think we're going to try to treat this fairly. I think a lot of people have not treated the film fairly because of Ezra Miller. But again, let's not put the cart before the horse. The things that, of course, he was being accused of, it goes from everything from child grooming, I suppose. I don't really know how truthful any of these things are. Burglary, assault and battery. A lot of these things were kind of alleged at him. Now, I to this point, I don't believe he was found guilty of anything. I think he plead out on a burglary charge or something like that. But in a court of law, let's just say he is not a convict. He hasn't been convicted of anything. He's not a felon. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt in this case that whatever foibles he may have in his personal life, it is not something that I'm going to judge his work on. So again, with that out of the way, the public perception seems to be, and I think unfairly, that if you want to see this movie, you're somehow supporting Ezra Miller and his journey of crime and his, you know, leaving a wake of, leaving a trail of crime and destruction in his wake. I don't know. I feel very strongly that you can separate the art from the artist. Now, like I said, I don't find that he's been convicted of anything. And a lot of Michael Jackson fans have basically hung their hat on, well, he's never been convicted of anything. In a sense, I understand that. I don't think we can kind of paint with a broad brush that if you're supporting the film, you're somehow supporting him, whatever he may or may have not done. Buying the album Thriller doesn't mean you support whatever possible uh, unsavory acts Michael Jackson may have done. So again, long way around to say that a lot of people are trying to shame you for going to see this movie or trying to support Ezra Miller. I think that's a lot of crap. I think you should be allowed to see a work of art and not have whatever the creator's political affiliations or whatever weird things that they're into affect your enjoyment of the film. I mean, that's only fair because I mean, like for instance, we start our show when we do the reviews with Wagner. A lot of people would know that he was like a favorite of Hitler's. And I mean, you can't go by what the art is compared to who's making it or who's partaking of it. That's kind of leftist thinking in my thoughts. It's not, you know, the way that our side is supposed to behave. We're against cancel culture. And I feel the same way about Amber Heard, and I've said this before, and I'm going to, of course, review Aquaman 2 whenever it comes out by the same standards of if she gives a good performance or not. I am not going to boycott it or shame people for seeing it. Of course, if you don't want to see it because of Ezra Miller, you have every right not to as well. If you feel that you're somehow doing wrong by supporting him, quote unquote, by seeing the movie or supporting Warner Brothers or DC or whatever, that's your business. So I'm not going to shame you for not supporting the film, so to speak, but I'm also not going to allow you to shame others for wanting to see this film and potentially enjoying it. All right, so with that history out of the way, let's take a look at some brief non-spoiler thoughts. The way I described this on Twitter, that's kind of where I put my non-spoiler thoughts. I said if Thor Love and Thunder was actually a good movie, it would probably look like this movie. It had the same wild swings that they try for some very broad humor that, depending on how you feel about it, may or may not work. Tonally, though, they swing the other way and they do some really profound, moving and touching, sentimental scenes that are very powerful. And I think that's kind of what they were trying to do with Love and Thunder. And with Love and Thunder, it just didn't work because the humor was not funny. It was just cringe. And the stuff with pathos was just like really clawingly sentimental that it could have found a way to be resolved without, the problem being what it was. Not to get into reviewing that movie again. But for instance, in this case, Barry has it within his power to save his mother. I don't think this is spoiling it. And that leads to a version of Flashpoint. Anybody that's seen the CW Flash TV series knows this story intimately because they basically have gone back to that night, the murder of his mother, many times over the course of the series. At least once a season, there'll be some kind of storyline that's connected with that. And I think because Barry is, sort of in charge of his destiny at this point, it's different than Thor, which they're dealing with cancer and there really was no option to save Jane, and that made it sort of a downer movie. In this case, Barry has to learn just exactly what is in his hands to save his mother. Can he? Can he not? Again, I won't get into that right this second. I think that it was an entertaining movie. I think that see. I'm going to give it, and what I have given it is like 3 stars, which that's kind of what I gave Ant Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But I think this film is somewhat better than that. I think the problem was there was some slow points where it's slow moving, and you have to kind of, it depends, as I said on Twitter, on your level of investment in the Ezra Miller character. I think a lot of people don't particularly like Ezra Miller's Barry Allen. He's not my Barry Allen either. He's certainly not the comics version of Barry Allen. I forgot to get this image up. You probably would rather be seeing Michael Keaton. But I think that if you approach the film on its own terms and you say, well, this not this it may not be my version of Barry Allen, but because this is a multiverse movie and it really deals with all different versions of the multiverse, which again, that's not a spoiler when you see Michael Keaton right in front of you, you know this is going to deal with a multiverse. I think that if you can accept that it's a multiverse version of Barry Allen and accept on those terms, you will be able to find some enjoyment in it. Now, again, a lot of people are complaining about, especially the second Barry, which is what I guess they're calling him, this the younger past version of Barry being annoying. I thought he was very good. I think he was good at playing both parts. I think he made the second version just naive and goofy enough. I didn't find any problem with that. A lot of people are complaining about the CGI, and I think it's 50-50. I think the fact of him playing both parts, apart from one scene, it's seamless. It's flawless. It really feels like there are two, Ezra Millers in those scenes. It doesn't really feel, and you have to give credit to the CGI for that, and also a lot of fights and choreography, which may or may not be CGI. I don't know. The fact that it's so seamlessly integrated, I think, in a lot of cases, it worked. But we'll talk about the bad CGI in a moment. So again, I'm giving this one 3 stars. I I enjoyed Shazam 2 better. So this is not going to be the best superhero movie of the year for me. I think it was better than Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I didn't see Guardians 3 yet, but to be honest with you, I'm not a huge Guardians fan. I can't really imagine that's going to be the favorite of mine this year. But this one kind of comfortably fits in at number 2 of the films I've seen this year. And again, briefly, Michael Keaton is great. It's great to see him again. I think they did justice by the Michael Keaton version of Batman. We'll get into that more. Some issues, but I think it was fine. So I would say, yeah, if you're on the fence, I think it's a movie worth going to see. I think, at 3 stars, consequently, if you don't go see it in theaters, I don't think you've missed out on this experience that you can't see on video or streaming or whatever way you're going to consume this eventually. I think if you're a diehard fan of Keaton's Batman, you'd probably be best served to see it up the movies in the theater. That's probably something that you'd want to do. But again, it's kind of middle of the road fare. I would like to see it again to kind of cement my thoughts. But I think the initial reaction I had pretty much is that it's a slightly better than average movie, which is basically what I said about Ant-Man 3. It's slightly better than average. Okay, so we'll get to the spoilers here. We'll go through as much of the story as we can. Um, so spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning. The film begins, and it serves as sort of, I think, the ending of the Snyderverse. Now we still have Aquaman 2 to deal with coming up. It's going to depend on exactly how that movie ends. I think we're going to always have the quote unquote DCEU slash Snyderverse in some respect, because it's going to be part of the multiverse. That's kind of what we learned in this movie, is that basically it's like any multiverse. There's going to be a universe out there where Ezra Miller's Flash continues to exist, and Ben Affleck's Batman will exist, and it's going to be out there somewhere. But it's going to depend on what filmmaker wants to pull them out, the way they pulled out Michael Keaton from retirement and said, "Well, here's your Batman for this movie." So the film begins with, of course, if you have Chicago and Peter Cetera in your soundtrack, you've already won in my book. But it begins with the traditional DC EU, where Ezra is in the universe, and we have Ben Affleck's Batman, and he's called away to by Alfred Jeremy Irons. Of course, I don't think that's really a spoiler either. I've seen that before. I've seen the film, but Jeremy Irons is contacting Ezra Miller's Flash, and the Flash has to help with I guess a bomb went off or something. I can't remember how it went, but the hospital is collapsing, and all the babies are falling out, literally a baby shower. And I thought this was a fun, opening scene, a fun way to get yourself into the movie and have the action just hit you really fast. This is where the CGI, I think, was the worst. Now, there was some CGI later on when they have that, what I call the arena, when Flash goes into what I guess is his film version of the Speed Force, where he can see the future and the past and run whichever way he wants to sort of affect the timeline. That was what I think Andy Machete said, that was like personally, I mean, that was purposefully going to be phony looking. And I think it's, acceptable on those terms. In the same way, the CGI looked really phony here with the babies. They looked really wonky. But I think the idea was to purposefully not have them look ultra realistic because of the goofiness of the scene. Now you have the Flash. He's trying to get nutrition because, again, this is something that goes back to even the John Wesley Shipp version of the Flash, where he has to be eating like near constantly. And I think that you can overdo that. I mean, it's funny like the first 5 or 6 times, but when the Flash is constantly got to be eating, it's kind of like, all right, we get the idea. I mean, that shouldn't be his weakness, because does the Flash have a weakness? Not really. But his weakness seems to be, well, if he doesn't eat like a crap ton within every 15 minutes, he's going to burn out. So the idea being that he had to nourish himself before saving these babies could have rubbed people the wrong way. But the scene is played so much for laughs that, essentially everything is paused during his speed run there. Anybody that's seen how they do that, he's basically got everything standing still while he goes and saves the babies and moves things around so that they don't get hit by needles and so on and so forth. And it's a great scene. It's really funny and fun. And I think, see, I've never really cared for the funny Barry Allen. And this is sort of like reminds me of the Justice League Unlimited version, or the Justice League United, or whatever the animated series was called. I never really cared for the funny Barry, and he was funny in that show because they were basically basing him on Wally West. I never really cared for that, but it works here in this framework of a Justice League picture or a Justice League universe where all these guys are always on call with each other. And so Batman needs help. He calls the Flash, and the Flash is goofy because we need at least one goofy member of the Justice League, unless they intend on putting Shazam in it. There really is no other goofy member. So it was a good scene. It was fun and enjoyable. And again, CGI kind of wonky, but it was It was really good. Then we had the Ben Affleck. This is his big, I guess, swan song as Batman, and so we get to see him doing the heroics on the Bat Cycle and the escapade of trying to stop these mercenaries or whatever with this poison toxin that they're gonna threaten the city with or whatever. And I think the Ben Affleck scenes worked out great. I mean, I feel like, and I think Affleck himself is on record saying that he felt the most like Batman in this scene compared to pretty much all the Batman stuff he's done. And it's true. I think that he really captured the essence of at least his Batman here. And they didn't use the garbled electrostatic voice. I hated that in Justice League and in uh, Batman v Superman. It's ridiculous. I don't think, you don't really need that much effort to suspend disbelief when it comes to a voice of a masked character. So that's like when Bale was making his voice get more and more raspy, and Affleck with the electronic garbler, and they did the same thing with Arrow, and you really don't need that. And I'm glad they kind of played it straight here. We get our first cameo, which is Wonder Woman, which for an actress that everyone was pretty much acting like, well, her time is done. She's done an awful lot, considering that everybody had her retired at this point. And again, more news. We'll do a news segment at some point because we've got to get another Torch News roundup up. But apparently, she's making some comments hinting that she's not done as Wonder Woman yet officially. So we've seen her in Shazam 2. We've seen her here. And this was my least favorite part, basically, of the movie is they did that, like, jokey thing that they did in Justice League, the Josh Whedon version, where Batman is kind of like he's quite ironically, he's acting a lot like the George Clooney Batman. And I think also, if you're looking for, and I know all my YouTube contemporaries probably are looking for a woke moment in the film, this is pretty much the only woke moment where, Wonder Woman's pulling him up with the lasso and he's saying like the truth against his will, where he's like, well, I can't thank you because my ego won't allow it, and if I really thought about it, I'd put more money to poverty and not be fighting crime on the streets, or some such nonsense like that. And I'm like, really, you're really gonna go there? We don't need that. It reminded me too of, like I said, the Josh Whedon Justice League, where Batman's like, I don't not like you. It just, with that goofy looking cowl and Affleck's delivery, it comes off very George Clooney-ish, and you know, it just doesn't feel right for this kind of project. I mean, maybe if you're outright doing a like Clooney was doing, you're doing a takeoff on the '60s Batman, that's okay. But in this context, it just seems really weird. So eventually Barry, like I said, we've got the story of the CW show essentially. And if you know the CW show, his father Henry is in prison for his mother's murder, and he's trying to desperately get him out on parole, and the evidence is not there. And again, it really feels like they've taken that page from the CW. I mean, I'm really tired of seeing this, but they managed to do something different with it. I don't know if it's spoilers for the CW version, but the Reverse Flash is basically behind Barry's mother's murder. In this film, they don't even deal with that. That's like an afterthought. Who killed his mother? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. It could have been the Reverse Flash. It could have been anybody. There's no reason why she was killed. They don't discuss a motive. And I think the idea was that they were probably going to go back to this if they did do a sequel, which again, that's very much in doubt, particularly in this post gun takeover where he's now planning out the whole slate of DC films. So we get Iris West again. Again, if I guess if you want to talk about things being woke, I think that started with Zack Snyder's casting, though. But of course, they cast a black actress again, race changing a character. Iris doesn't have a lot to do in this movie, compared especially to the Candace Patton Iris. But Barry's kind of in love with her, and is not able to verbalize that affection. So, but eventually he comes to the realization that he can go back to the past, and this, of course, sparks the idea that he's going to go and try to save his mother because that would have saved his father, who is like likely not to get out of prison because the evidence still isn't changed, even though Bruce Wayne's trying to edit the footage of the camera to establish an alibi. So he gets this idea and he goes to Bruce Wayne, Ben Affleck, and basically tells him that he wants to go back in time, that he could save his parents, he could save Bruce's parents, and Bruce, of course, doesn't like the idea because basically they don't really go there, but it's a very Christian message, I think, where it's like everything happens for a reason. You know, we don't know the reason now, we don't understand the reason, but if you were able to go back and monkey with time, it's going to ruin something else because it sounds weird to say it like this, but it's an act of selfishness to change something that was already ordained, that was supposed to happen. And he kind of learns this the hard way in the movie. So again, it's a very good plot. It's very different from the Flashpoint paradox. Now, I haven't read the comics, but I've seen the animated movie, which I'm surprised I don't think I've done a review on that. I should. It's a very good movie if you haven't seen it, but it's very different from this movie. The only thing it has in common is Barry having to get his powers back and Batman helping him, and also the concept of he went back in the past to save his mother. Well, there was also a similar thing with they have to find Superman who is captured, and in this case, it was Supergirl. They changed it for I don't know, purely political reasons, possibly. I don't know, to get another female character in the movie. But so Barry goes back in the past, and he tries to do a very subtle change by just making sure that his mother has a can of tomatoes. That one can of tomatoes is like the MacGuffin, and it was really interesting. And again, long story short, it's really interesting to see that when him having done this, and apparently he sees the future that whatever it was, 10 years go by, 12 years go by, or something, and his he thinks he can step into his rightful place at that point, even though he looks like I'm guessing he's about 30 here, and he kind of like fits in and is having dinner with his parents, and then the goofy and nuts 18-year-old version of him comes in, and again, there's a lot of funny time travel shenanigans that kind of they literally mention Back to the Future and how in this new timeline Eric Stoltz is Marty McFly, which is a funny little tribute because there's Back to the Future fans know he was originally cast as Marty, and then they didn't think it worked out so well, and so they brought Michael J. Fox in. And it's funny, that was a nice tribute as well. So again, with the paradox type thing was interesting because, well, Barry now he can't just fill in for his 18-year-old self, but he can't get rid of him because that kind of would take him out. So he has to be sure that this version of Barry gets hit by lightning and gets the chemical bath so that he will have the powers so that in the future he will be able to have come back in time and establish this whole redo to begin with. And that's like the interesting thing about these time travel shenanigans in these movies is you have to like have it make sense, and they did a pretty good job, I think, of making it make sense. It gets even more convoluted at the end, as you would expect, but we'll get to that in a second. So there, this is the point in the film though where it slows down, and I think maybe some judicious editing probably could have cut about 10 minutes out here and there. I mean, there's some goofy stuff. I mean, there's Barry gets a tooth knocked out and he gets it replaced with super glue, and young Barry is flashing around town, quite literally, his clothes burned off. I didn't really need to see that, but there's like some stuff that maybe they could have trimmed to make this a little bit more palatable because it does feel like this middle second act, I guess, kind of drags a little bit. Uh, Jumping forward, then the introduction of Michael Keaton's Batman is where things really speed up and it really hits its stride. But I like the relationship of these two. He basically is arguing with like his younger self for being irresponsible and having no friends and being annoying. And it's funny because it's like you you at one time you feel like for both of them, like the older Barry, he understands now how he comes off to other people, that he can be that way and that annoying and just like manic. But on the other hand, you feel for Barry too, who was like really an innocent. You know what I mean? He kind of didn't ask for all this, and it's happening to him. And like I said, there is some poignancy in this. Ezra Miller does a good job of conveying this emotion. And you got to give it to him, I think, in that respect. All right, so Michael Keaton's Batman, they did a great job with evoking the original Batman, especially Batman 89, where you see the Wayne Manor. It looks exactly the same. They recreated the kitchen that I think we see only briefly in Batman 89. And we see the library, all the sets, they look exactly the same. And it's just that level of investment is so good. And of course, Michael Keaton steals the picture. I'm hopefully going to review the first two Batman films with Michael Keaton soon, possibly all four, because like I said, originally my whole idea was when I joined YouTube was really to just review movies. And I pretty much made my imprint doing that. Then I got lazy and I did the live stream stuff because it's easier on me to just talk stream of consciousness. But I want to go back and try to do like maybe some like I did originally some 10-minute reviews of the original Batman films. And maybe they'll be longer, but they're going to be probably recorded. So, but just to give you an idea now, I was not really a huge fan of the Burton films. I liked Michael Keaton's Batman because I thought he was the best actor to play Batman, particularly in the 90s. He took it the most serious, and he didn't overplay the role of Bruce Wayne. He didn't make him too much of a goof, but then again, you could tell there was like an undercurrent there where he was trying to do that dual personality thing. I think there were a lot of things that you need to worry about with Batman, such as Batman killing and so on and so forth. To his credit, I don't think he really killed anybody in this movie. I don't know if it was for lack of trying, but they really didn't show him killing anybody, so I kind of felt good about that. But Batman slash Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is now like a hermit in the Batcave, and it was kind of touch and go for a minute there because I said, are they going to do the same thing that they always do? They're going to sort of Jake Skywalker him. He doesn't want to help. He looks like a hermit. He literally had the same long hair and beard as Jake Skywalker, Mark Hamill's version in Last Jedi. And I'm like, he's going to say no. He's not going to help them. And that does happen. But it felt more natural to me because he's kind of, I think the thing is they were trying to say that Gotham City was like crime free and that he wasn't called upon anymore. He really didn't need to. I kind of felt like Batman wouldn't just abandon his post like that, but they were trying to portray the idea of they didn't need Batman anymore. He kind of just decided to hang around and be a hermit in Wayne Manor. And eventually, Barry and Barry go into the Batcave, and you see all the wonderful recreation of the Batman, the Batmobile, and the Batcave, and the Batcomputer, and all that from the original movies. And the Bat suits. It's really, you know, it was really great. I mean, that was like the highlight of the movie for me was like seeing the Michael Keaton Batman again, and how the Burton universe kind of was sort of reflected in the scenes there. So of course, eventually Bruce Wayne relents and he gets a shave and a haircut and puts the bat suit on again, decides to help them. And it's really fun because you get to see how great it would have been if Michael Keaton would have continued on and things went different than they did, and instead of Batman Forever, maybe he could have continued on doing Batman, presumably without Tim Burton, which would have made all the difference. They have a couple of jokes that are harkening back to Batman '89. He does "I'm Batman." He does "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts." And I think I kind of wish that they didn't have those in the trailers because there really isn't too much after that. After that, there was one more where he goes, "How much do you weigh?" And I was, there's only so many callbacks you can make, and I was kind of feeling like, well, gee, you kind of already blew your callbacks in the trailer, and I'm not usually like that. I usually don't care, but it's kind of I felt like that was the only one that was a surprise. Is how much do you weigh? You know what I mean? But there was some sweet action. Oh, it was great seeing him in action again. He was using the batarang. I swear, nobody really uses the batarang in live action. I think Christian Bale used it as a calling card. I mean, Adam West used it a couple of times, maybe, to climb buildings, but you don't really ever see him whacking people off the head with a batarang in the movies. And the Flash film was like the first where he made extensive use of the batarang as a weapon, and it was great. And that's what Batman's supposed to be using, the batarang. And the action scenes, like I said, I mean, obviously Keaton is like 72 or something. There must have been stunt doubles and some CGI involved, but he looked excellent. And the funny thing is, you kind of get the sense that he hasn't lost a step. It's like, a lot of people would be like making the age jokes and this and that, but they really don't give you any idea that he's an old man. Like, they're not playing up that he's old. They're just playing up that he's like retired. And the funny thing is he hasn't lost a step. It doesn't feel like he's been retired. It feels like he could just jump right back into it. It's essentially what he does. Supergirl. So they get Supergirl out of the prison now, and like I said, this is shades of the Flashpoint Paradox animated film, where it was originally Superman, but he's sort of an emaciated, runty looking character because he was brought up in this penitentiary type place with the red sun beams keeping his powers in check. And so they rescue her basically just on Barry Prime's humanity, because Batman's like, he's not here, let's go. And Barry too is just like following his lead, but he's like, Barry Prime is like, no, we got to save her. We can't just leave her here. And of course, she has the Supergirl costume, which kind of gives you the idea that, she was going to be necessary to this plot, their plot to stop General Zod, which of course, yeah, Michael Shannon's back as General Zod, basically doing over the Man of Steel plot where he wants the Codex, which I always thought was a stupid thing, and Feora's there, and the big retarded Kryptonian guy that's like for some reason bigger than everybody else. I guess it's their version of Non. I don't know. So they bring her out into the sun, and she has the powers once again of Supergirl and can defeat all these Soviet forces or whatever. And they take her back, and she's this is kind of almost like the modern version of Supergirl, where she has like a chip on her shoulder and she really doesn't want to help, and she takes off, and then only when she sees Zod decimating the United States Army that she goes back and realizes, well, I got to help you, because even though you're not my people, and you've you know give me no reason to trust you people, and I got to keep Zod from taking over. That's Sasha Cali, I think her name is. As far as she's concerned, I thought she was good. I mean, I prefer the original version of Supergirl being, a blonde, blue-eyed actress like Melissa Benoist did a perfect job. I still say she's my favorite version of Supergirl, and she just had the personality too of it. She didn't have this personality like this Sasha Cali version, which is like got a chip on her shoulder. But she comes back, and she comes back in time for the Flash. The Barry Prime is wanting to get his powers back again in shades of the original movie, and they got to do the experiment over again with the same chemicals, with a lightning bolt. And this part I really don't understand. For whatever reason, it doesn't work the first time, even though he gets hit by lightning and the chemicals do bathe him or whatever. But they needed Supergirl to fly him up and get hit by lightning way up in the sky. So I guess it's to give her something to do, really, because she comes back. She doesn't really have a whole lot to do in the film. Like I said, I, I felt like she was fine, but she's completely underwhelming. You know what I mean? It's like she worked fine in this movie, but I don't really desire ever to see her again. I mean, I don't care if I ever see her again as Supergirl because she really has nothing to do with the traditional version of Supergirl as far as I'm concerned. She's just an Elseworlds version. So she should stay in the Elseworlds lane, you know? I mean, there's no real need to bring her back. So, a very funny scene where Barry 2 is now getting one of Batman's old costumes to try to give himself a costume now because he gave his costume back to Barry Prime. And it's funny. He's trying to cut the ears off the cowl and he spray paints, a flash lightning bolt on the Batman chest symbol there. Really funny stuff. And they go off to take on Zod and the Kryptonian army. Uh, I kind of feel like they did Cavill dirty by not. I think he had a cameo in this at some point. It was reported and it was cut. He is in the film technically because you see the back of Superman in one scene, and it's Cavill Superman allegedly. So I mean, it's technically supposed to be Cavill Superman, and you also see him in the flashback scene where he's trying to go into the past and he's going past fighting Kal-El in Justice League. So to say that Henry Cavill's not in the film is an overstatement, but they didn't get him back to do a scene the way they did with in Black Adam, which is sad. I think but again, it's been a wild, crazy ride in this Snyderverse post Snyder, where Cavill was going to be our Superman because The Rock said so, basically, and then in this movie, it was alleged that Michael Keaton was going to be our Batman going forward, and apparently that's not going to be the case anymore. And we'll get into that in a second. But Batgirl was scrapped, remember? And Michael Keaton was going to be Batman again in that one. And apparently, going forward, I don't know. I mean, I seen another news item, like I said, where Kevin Smith was saying that there would be a Batman Beyond if this film was a success. And apparently, it doesn't look like it's going to be. But I don't know. They still have plenty of opportunities to, go back on that. So they fight Zod, and Batman basically crashes the Batwing into, and the Batwing is beautiful. I love the Batwing. I love the Batwing in Batman 89. It's just a great imagery there with him flying in a giant bat. I just love that. And the way the Batwing works, where he sort of is like, the B Wing from Return of the Jedi, even though it wasn't really in the movie, it was like maybe in one scene in the background where it had a swivel cockpit and the whole apparatus goes around, but he still stays right side up. Oh man, that was just awesome. That was beautiful. I don't think they didn't get a chance to do too much with it, I guess, but I mean they really did great with showing the maneuverability he has in it and everything. It was really good. And so the two Flashes are like taking on the ground troops. Batman's in the Batwing with taking on the spaceship, so to speak, and Supergirl is taking on Zod, and Zod still needs her for the Codex blood or whatever, and he tells her that you know Kal-El in this world never made it to Earth. He was. They don't really let you know. They kind of suggest that maybe Zod killed him, but he never made it to Earth. He died en route, and he needed Kara's blood, and that's kind of what he needs to power his terraforming machine or whatever. So she dies, And then Batman does, he can't eject, and he's like doing a kamikaze mission because he's gonna blow up anyway because he's gonna crash, and so he's like takes out another Kryptonian ship. And it's really sad to me because when Batman dies, he can't kill any of these Kryptonians. I mean, no matter how many bombs you put on them and blow them up and whatever, they're not going to die, man. They need kryptonite, or they need like a Kryptonian shard of Kryptonian metal. That's always been the gimmick, too. Like, if you got a knife that was made on Krypton from Krypton metals, you can stab Superman, but you can't do it. I mean, it's not kryptonite, because kryptonite is like the earth, the dirt, the soil, the rock. But if you have metal that was formed from that, you have a weapon, and they have that here. And that's how he stabs Kara. So Barry too gets the idea that, well, look, we can just go back in time, right? So Batman won't die, Supergirl won't die. We'll get another crack at it. And Barry Prime is like, well, yeah, I guess. All right, why not? So they go back in time, and this time, and I kind of felt at the time, I says, well, Batman's not really going to die. I mean, we're in a time travel movie, so I kind of felt like that wasn't the end of their story. So, but they go back in time, and then Batman uh, is, like I said, he's placing bombs on the big non guy or whatever, and trying to blow him up, even though, because Barry puts him wise. He's like, "Don't go after that ship. There's a shield on it or something." And Batman's like, "Roger that." So he saved him, and so that's great. But it's not really going to make any difference in the battle because they're fighting Kryptonians who cannot be killed without kryptonite. And in this case, nobody knows what a Kryptonian is. That this is not after Batman v Superman, where Lex Luthor discovered kryptonite. There's no kryptonite, so Batman is never going to be able to defeat these people, no matter how much prep time they give him by turning the time back and telling him, "Don't do this." All right, then he does something else, and the Kryptonians are still going to kill him. The only way he's not going to get killed is if he's not there. So I forget what happened, but he ends up getting injured again, Batman, and this time he gets actually a longer death scene. And that's when I said, "Oh, that's it for Batman. They're just not going to bring him back, are they?" And it was disappointing to me, but I knew that the writing on the wall was they were going to have to go back in time and turn this all back anyway. So Batman really didn't die, because you know how I feel about heroes dying and the characters dying. I was like, if they just killed off Batman, Michael Keaton's Batman, just for kicks and giggles and say, well, that was the end of Michael Keaton's journey as Batman. Nah, I wouldn't have liked it. But there, like I said, there were plans for him to be in Batgirl and going forward to be Batman in the DCU. So this was never going to be his death. So if they leave it like this, it's kind of disappointing, but it didn't feel final to me that they can never go back to the character of Michael Keaton's Batman. They really didn't kill him off. It just appears that way. Now, Barry too keeps wanting to go back and change things, and in truth, it's an innumerable amount of times that they keep going back and trying to change things. At some point, Barry Prime tells him, like, it's not going to happen. All right, we've done this like about whatever 700 times now, and every time we go back, nothing changes. I mean, Batman's still going to die, Supergirl's still going to die, and there's nothing accomplished. So he won't take that for an answer. He doesn't want anybody to die. And it's really sad because he keeps going back and trying to change it by himself at this point. And he won't give up. And the really sad thing about it is he knows at this point, he overheard Barry telling Bruce Wayne that he didn't tell Barry 2, the younger Barry, that he came back to save his mother. So he knows that if he doesn't stop Batman and Supergirl from dying, or in other words, if he doesn't stop Zod and the Kryptonian takeover, Barry Prime's going to go back and change the past so that, his mother dies, their mother dies, if you want to look at it that way. And so he's refusing to stop trying, but it's a fixed point. Now, this is like where we get back to that time travel paradox stuff. Now, there are just some things that are not going to change. It's not meant to change. And you have to have that because, you know, if not, you would just keep going back and keep changing things that you don't like. I knew that they had to get to that point where he was going to say, we're going to make a mess of this. We keep doing this because Bruce Wayne tried to explain in that like funny scene where he has like the spaghetti and he's like saying, "Look, you've got spaghetti over here." It's reminded me kind of like what they did with John Wesley Shipp's Flash in the TV show, where he had like the cup and he's trying to say, "Look, you break the cup, you put it back together, but you still have the seams of where the pieces are put back in." Same thing here. He's like trying to say, "Look, you have two pieces of spaghetti. You think you change it and it's coming out to this side now, but it's really not. You've really made four different changes." And then when you keep doing that, you've made like a whole plate of spaghetti where the noodles are all over the place. And you have to realize that one change doesn't just affect one thing, it's going to affect all over the place. And it was really funny because it's at some point you knew this had to happen, but that doesn't make it any easier. So the villain of the piece, we see him briefly earlier on. And well, before we go on to that, I just want to say before I forget, the thing about Batman, the Michael Keaton Batman that I didn't mention, was it did feel very much like what they did with the Spider-Men in No Way Home. I really wanted to hear more about Batman. That was the only disappointing thing to me about Batman, was we didn't hear, well, he didn't bring up Alfred. He didn't say what happened between him and Selina, because of course you remember at the end of Batman Returns, they almost all but guaranteed she'd be back in either a sequel or a spin-off. So, Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman still exists. And I was kind of hoping for at least like they did with Spider-Man. It was like they played up to that. It's like, well, do you have a girlfriend? He's like, well, it's complicated. You knew that he was still trying to get with Mary Jane, even though they didn't really cement what their relationship was, that it was still kind of going on. And the same thing here, I would have liked if they would have filled in a little bit of what his life was like. I mean, mentioning Alfred, talking about Selina. Did he have a Robin? Did he meet Dick Grayson in his timeline? You know what I mean? It would have been nice if they'd have given him at least one scene where he gets to name drop that stuff, the way they kind of did with Spider-Man in that film. So that was the only downside I felt to the Michael Keaton Batman stuff. I think they needed to give us an idea of what he'd been doing for the last 30 years. That kind of was important to me. All right, so while Barry's going back in time, we see the villain of the piece early in the film, and he returns here. And I kind of got the idea because I was saying to myself at one point, isn't Reverse Flash going to show up? Or are they going to make it one of these other? Because I know from the Flash TV show that they have like 1,001 different speedsters that are evil. Savitar. I says, is this supposed to be Savitar? I don't really know. But it does turn out to be Barry number 2. So we have in that scene Barry past, present, and future. And Barry past becomes Barry future. In the future, he comes as a completely, you know, disheveled and jaded person, because he's been trying for like, and he's like getting gray hair and he's worn and he's got like basically metal has completely encrusted his suit and his body, and he's like still determined to go back in time and stop it from happening, no matter how many times he's done it. And this has been potentially his life now for like whatever 300 years or something. So he Barry to the Barry of the past, he takes the shot because he's gonna kill Barry Prime, because he doesn't want Barry Prime to go back and ruin the mother's survival. And he kills Barry too, which of course reminded me again of like Eobard Thawne in the Flash TV show, where Eddie was killed and then he had no descendants because he died, and then Eobard was killed. But then again, Eobard kept coming back, and then finally in the last season of the Flash, Eddie comes back. So anything can happen, but it makes sense that when he killed the younger version of himself, he died. Now I'm wondering about the paradox, whether Barry Prime was going to die, because if you don't have Barry 18 years old, do you have Barry whatever he was, 30 years old? And then the Barry whatever 300 years old would all be killed. But I guess because he exists out of a different timeline, The Barry from the timeline where he created his own Savitar or whatever he was, that was the 18-year-old Barry. So all he had to do was kill the 18-year-old Barry in order for that Barry, the Savitar Barry or whatever he was, to die. That's how I made sense of it anyway. But the reason why all this was happening, of course, is with all the cameos. Now, this was, of course, a very fun part where you see the worlds collapsing into each other, and all of them represent a world where one of the heroes existed. We seen Christopher Reeves Superman. Of course, this was spoiled the heck out of before I even seen the movie, so I knew he was going to be in it. And nice of them to put Helen Slater along with her Supergirl alongside Christopher Reeve. I thought that was very nice as well. Now, again, I got to address this where a lot of people are naysayers and complaining about, oh, this is terrible. They're using an AI version of Christopher Reeve and he's dead and leave him alone and he didn't have any say in this and blah, 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 blah. I think that's ridiculous because, for one thing, this was basically a 3D photograph. This was not him being a character in the movie. He just flies down, looks through a portal. I think he looks over at Kara, his Helen Slater version of Supergirl, and that's it. It's basically a 3D photograph that they animated to have him move. This is not anybody dancing on his grave and having him do things that Christopher Reeve would not want him to do. That's ridiculous. So if you're going to complain about that, you're out of your mind. You're insane. Another thing is if they say they don't have the right, that's a lot of malarkey as well. Because let's go back to like Carrie Fisher when I think her kids, I think, signed off on her likeness being used in Rogue One, if I remember correctly. So I mean, if they do have the okay of the family, even more reason you don't have to complain because the family signed off on it. That should be good enough for you. But moreover, I think sticking with the Carrie Fisher analogy with Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher said, like, way back when, you sign your rights away when you do these movies. Now, Warner Brothers has every right to use any photograph of Christopher Reeve as Superman, just like Lucasfilm has the right to use any picture of Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia, because that's not Carrie Fisher's picture, that's Princess Leia's picture. When Carrie Fisher is done up to look like Princess Leia, and she has the hair buns and she's wearing the white outfit, or any other scene in any other Star Wars movie, that belongs to Lucasfilm. They can make that image do whatever they want. And it's the same thing here. If Christopher Reeve is in the Superman costume, or even consequently, if he was wearing the Clark Kent suit and glasses, they can use that image to do whatever they want because that image is owned by Warner Brothers. So if you're telling me that they don't have the rights, legally you don't got a leg to stand on. Now, could there be, like I said, in the case of something like, I don't know, Ghostbusters Afterlife, where they literally did uh Harold Ramis over again in CGI. Did they need to have the okay of the family to bring him back? I don't know. That's where it gets to be a gray area. If you're going to completely have him be a character in the movie, I don't know. But I know for one thing, like I said, what they used of him in this film was no problem. There was nothing wrong with that. And also, we saw George Reeves Superman. It's good to see that people remember George Reeves nowadays. They had the black and white version, which I thought they could have did that, but it was cool. They showed like the mechanical men from the um Max Fleischer cartoons. That was a fun homage. We seen Adam West's Batman. That was wonderful because Adam West, I would have liked to see him do more cameos in these kind of films. Unfortunately, he was old as it was, and he passed on before he got a chance to do too many. But that was great. I was surprised Linda Carter's Wonder Woman didn't show up in one of these worlds or whatever. Of course, the big one was Nicolas Cage as Superman. Now, to be honest with you, I'm one of those who don't really care about Nicolas Cage as Superman. Tim Burton barely knew what he was doing with Batman. He had no idea what he was doing with Superman. So I really had no desire to see a Nicolas Cage Superman film. And they had the Spider, which there's a big story around that. If you haven't seen, you probably have, but if you haven't seen Kevin Smith talk about the Spider-Man, the Superman script that he wrote for what's his name, Peters, the producer, that had to include a giant spider. Check out that; you'll find it on YouTube. Kevin Smith talking about Superman script. It's really funny. And Nicolas Cage, I think they brought him back to do this. And again, he doesn't look like Superman to me. I don't think I would have bought him as Superman, but as this being a little nod to the fans, it was fine and okay. It's sort of like what they wanted to do. A lot of fans wanted to see Tom Cruise as Iron Man and Multiverse of Madness. It's another pipe dream that fans have that I really don't care about. I really don't need to see Tom Cruise as Iron Man. I didn't need to see Nicolas Cage as Superman, but again, it's like a nice nod to the fans. They showed the other one was what's his name? Ted Sears as Jay Garrick. Now, this is where I think they made a mistake. They should have had John Wesley Shipp's Jay Garrick as the cameo of the Flash, because it would have been a nice way to get him in, because he deserves to be in. And he's my favorite Flash. He's always going to be my favorite Flash. And they just completely wasted it. Now, I would have preferred to see the Flash as John Wesley Shipp in the Flash costume and not have to do Jay Garrick. But I'm saying if you wanted that recognition, that actor recognition of seeing John Wesley Shipp, that probably would have been the best thing to do. Have him be the Silver Age Flash in that Elseworlds scene. They didn't have Grant Gustin, and I think I understand why, because Grant Gustin's Flash has already met Ezra Miller's Flash in the Crisis on Infinite Earths of the CW. So one would think he would enlist his help or something. And I think that kind of opened a Pandora's box that you didn't really want to do. This was just them looking in and stuff. I mean, I guess they could have done it. But since they already met, you would have had Grant Barry say, "Oh, I know this guy. He's in trouble. Let me help him." And what's he going to say? Because when you see all these other heroes, Christopher Reeve Superman, for instance, is just looking in, curious about what's going on. He doesn't get a chance to help, really. He's just like taken aback by what's going on. Again, I don't have a problem with that kind of technology. I think, someday they're probably going to do a Christopher Reeve Superman movie where you're going to have Michael Keaton's Batman and you're going to have Linda Carter's Wonder Woman and you're going to have John Wesley Shipp's Flash. They very well are going to do that within 20 years. And if you don't think they are, then you're crazy. That's the same thing they're doing with, they're going to have Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker, Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia, and Harrison Ford's Han Solo. They're going to have them all together finally at some point in a CGI movie with the deep fake technology and all that. That's coming. I'm telling you right now, it's coming. They're already doing some of that. In Harrison Ford is de-aged in the beginning of Dial of Destiny, which I haven't seen yet. That's our next review coming up in like 2 weeks, something like that. So seeing the cameos, I thought was really good. It was a lot of fun. And then, of course, Barry has to go back in time in order to right this complete disaster that he made. Again, if you haven't seen the Flashpoint Paradox with the animated version, very different stuff. And that one, again, spoilers if you haven't seen that one. Bruce Wayne is killed as a child in the Joe Chill robbery, and his parents become Batman and the Joker. His father becomes Batman, and his mother becomes the Joker, and that's how you get the Batman in that film. It's really Thomas Wayne. I think Wonder Woman kills Mira. Reverse Flash is the main antagonist. Just a lot of stuff goes on in that film. It's really crazy, and you really should check it out if you haven't already. It's a really great film. The animated version of it was done very well. So to wrap it up, yeah, the very very poignant scene, a very sad scene, and I got misty eyed myself a little bit at it. But Barry goes back to place the can of tomatoes back on the shelf and takes it out of her cart, his mother, and he has like a somewhat contrived scene where he's like just a stranger talking to her, and he's uh, obviously overcome with emotion and crying because he's seeing his mother for what he knows is going to be the last time, and she's like hugging him and consoling him, but being a total stranger. But it's a nice moment. It's a really nice moment, and of course the big finish is when he comes back to present day. He still monkeyed with the time stream by putting the can of tomatoes or the whole set of tomato cans up on the shelf so that when the evidence that Bruce Wayne had fixed up so that it could be viewable, it's on the top shelf now, the tomatoes. So the camera footage shows his father looking up and showing that he has an alibi, that he wasn't there at the time his wife was killed. And that has ramification. Now, it makes you feel good because, at least he's gotten the consolation of being able to save his father from a life in prison. Well, it doesn't even save him from the 20 years, I guess it's been, that he's been in prison, but at least that he won't die in prison. But that has its ramifications as well. And so at the end of the movie, he's trying to get with Iris again and so forth. And then the Bruce Wayne comes out of the car, and it turns out to be George Clooney. Now, again, this was something that was spoiled for me, but I didn't remember it because what I was thinking was I remember seeing behind the scenes photos of Michael Keaton at the courthouse steps. And so I was saying, oh yeah, this is where they're going to show Michael Keaton again. And then you hear the sound of the Danny Elfman theme, which of course they played through the whole movie, which was so great. That's one of the best themes after Superman. That's the best superhero theme, is the Batman theme from Danny Elfman. But and you think, oh, it's gonna be Michael Keaton. He's back and he's in this timeline as Batman now. Turns out to be George Clooney, and it's a good laugh. It's a good laugh, and I can see them ending it on that. But like I said, I would have liked to have thought that there was some kind of future for Michael Keaton's Batman going forward, because that was originally the plan, that they were going to do something with him with Batgirl. And again, I don't really care that that film was shelved. I mean, if it's someday it's going to be released in some state. I don't know if they've completed the effects on it, but it'll be released at some backdoor way, like they did with the Fantastic Four film in the 90s. And I don't think he had that much of a presence in that film, but that film looked terrible anyway. So, but hopefully that that won't be the end of Michael Keaton's Batman. We'll be able to see him don the cowl again. The after credit scene was not really anything to write home about. Aquaman is bombed, and the Flash is like trying to tell him about his adventures in the multiverse. And I mean, I'm gonna stay for the end of the credits all the time, no matter what. And it was all right with me. I was fine. But I mean, if you're the type that doesn't care about the end credits, and only if it's like a real great cliffhanger, it ain't a cliffhanger. I mean, this is like kind of trying to whet your appetite for uh Aquaman 2. I forget what it's called. I keep forgetting the postscript on that, but Aquaman 2, The Kingdom of Atlantis or something. They had Tamara Morrison do a cameo as well. That was pretty funny. Um, Ray Fisher, of course, was persona non grata because he's decided to go to war against WB. But yeah, so pretty much everybody gets their cameo. Not Henry Cavill so much. I think it's because the antagonism between Warner Brothers and Cavill, it's sort of, it's palpable. Let's put it that way. There's something to it because they kept trying to get him in, and they got him. They wanted to get him on Shazam 1, and he was like, "Nah, I can't do it." And then he wanted to do it really bad, and they were like, "Nah, we don't want you." It's like they really can't get together on, getting Cavill with Superman. I don't know why. Quite honestly, I don't. So again, that about wraps it up. Well, final thoughts. Let's see. Like I said, it's far from the worst superhero movie I've ever seen. I think it was quite good. I think it was quite entertaining. Uh, but it was better than mid. But I wouldn't put this on my top 10 list. I mean, top DC movies, it would probably make it somewhere down to, I don't know, maybe in the teens or something. It would take me a while to figure out, are we talking DCEU? Are we talking, I mean, because DCEU doesn't really have a great track record to run on. I mean, they had Wonder Woman, Shazam 2. Those are my favorites of the DCEU era. I think Suicide Squad, not the Suicide Squad, but Suicide Squad was a good one. So I mean, if you want to look at it that way, maybe that makes the top five. I liked the Whedon Justice League. I know that's kind of anathema to a lot of people, that film, but I like that one a lot, considering what we had to work with there. So yeah, I'll probably make my top five DCEU. Now, if we're putting all DC films in, like I said, probably more towards the teens or something, because then you got the Reeve movies, especially the first two. I might even put all four Reeve movies in before this film. I don't know. Well, no, not Superman 3. I couldn't in good conscience put Superman 3 ahead of this one. Superman 4 is a guilty pleasure for me if you want to look at it that way. It's like Batman and Robin. I like the film. I understand its shortcomings, but I still enjoy it. The Batman films with Keaton, this is kind of on par with them. I don't know. But like I said, I could basically judge this more on the current crop of superhero films because, like I said, a lot of people are acting like, again, they're going to start crying it's a failure, superhero movies aren't good anymore, and it's fatigue setting in, and all of this is nonsense. I think we've lost a step in the current crop of superhero movies. That's not a lie. But a lot of them are not really that bad. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, for instance, like I said, I think Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is kind of mid, but it's a little bit better than mid. This is a good film. It's a little bit better than mid. There hasn't been any real great films apart from, again, I think people should take a look at Shazam 2. To me, that was like the best film that's come out of the last 3 or 4 years. Since Multiverse of Madness. When did that come out? I don't remember. Was that 2021? I'm not sure, but yeah, going back the last couple of years, it's been Multiverse of Madness. It's been Shazam 2. Then I'd say maybe this one, and then maybe Quantum Mania. Those are the only ones I could think of that I've enjoyed in the past couple of years, despite there being a lot of films coming out. I mean, Wakanda Forever, not crazy about it. Shang-Chi, it was okay. Black Widow, again, not crazy about it. All these films have been kind of mid to not great. So it's understandable when people are like, oh, it's on the decline. The superhero movies are on the decline. Well, to be honest with you, this one is a step above the declining films. I think it deserves that much credit. And again, I think a lot of people are staying away for multiple reasons. I think a lot of people stood away from Shazam 2 for multiple reasons, mostly because they think, well, there's going to be a do-over. Nothing that happens in this film has any consequence, which isn't true, really. In this case, a lot of people are not going to want to see Ezra Miller or support Ezra Miller because of his shenanigans off screen. A lot of people don't like Ezra Miller's Flash to begin with, so it's kind of understandable. So again, there's a lot of reasons for why this film is allegedly underperforming, but I think it deserves a shot. I think, again, it depends on what your tolerance is for the goofy humor that Ezra Miller's Flash brings. I don't know if I would put this at 3 stars or 3.5 stars. At the moment, I want to say 3.5 stars, but I really need to see it again to really cement my feelings on it. But again, 3 stars, it's better than mid. I think the other half a star probably goes to Michael Keaton being in it and adding that punch in the arm that kind of the film needed when it needed it. So I'll say 3.5 stars. But again, let me know what you think in the comments below. See it for yourself and make your own decision. That's my whole war cry every time it comes to a movie. I say, don't let people tell you what to think about this. Go and see it for yourself. If you're interested, if you're not interested, fine. But if you're interested, see it for yourself and don't let people color your impressions on it. A lot of people have already broad brushed this one before it even came out saying it was horrible. People are doing the same thing now for Indiana Jones 5, which also may or may not be horrible, but see it for yourself and see what you think before making any kind of determination on that. So, thank you for joining us for another stellar broadcast here on the Johnnie Torch program. And like I said, I think, I can't give you a timetable on when, but we're going to do a Torch News Roundup pretty soon. We've been doing comic related shows, and we're going to do more comic related shows in the future, but we're going to do a Torch News Roundup where we're going to talk about some of the stuff going on, some of the news and pop culture, such as the Craven the Hunter movie, so on and so forth. That news has been out now with the poster being released and the trailer. So we'll talk about that stuff. And we also got the Johnnie Torch Reviews returning with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny coming out soon. I'm dying to see that one. So that's going to be coming up pretty soon and within the next couple of weeks. So until next we meet, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.